Hello everyone, I welcome you all for this webinar on Uplift Your Enterprise Architecture with Azure Integration Services. Azure provides independent integration services to overcome modern day challenges like overwhelming choices, too much to do in terms of analysis, competing priorities, and crushing complexity. All Azure Integration Services have been growing and extending their capabilities year on year, and it's indeed hard for us to keep up with all releases and innovations in the platform. In order to help us on this, in this session, Alessandro Moura, Microsoft Azure MVP, will showcase the available options in Azure for creating an enterprise-grade architecture for your integration solutions. For this session, his main focus will be on two concepts, logic apps and function apps, and the latest innovations in Service Bus, Event Grid, and Event Hubs. To brief you about the speaker, Alessandro Moura is currently an integration platform lead at Fisher and Paykel Applications. He has extensive experience working with integration technologies like BizTalk, Logic App, Service Bus, and Azure Functions, and a lot more. I welcome Alessandro for this webinar. Alessandro, you can take it forward from here.
Cool. Hello, guys. Thank you all for joining. So it's a pleasure to be here. I've been like I guess attendee listener for quite some time of these webcasts. So being here is just I guess a pleasure to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Alessandro. I work for Fisher and Paykel Appliances in Auckland, New Zealand. So I've been living here for a few years now. I think 4-5 years so far. So I am the integration platform lead for them. If you guys want to see what I post about, so you can follow my Twitter. So from time to time I post integration things in there, as well as my blog post. So I have a few materials available there. I try to post like once in a month at least. So always trying to I guess talk about the things that I see when work with designing and developing integration solutions with Azure. So, oh, sorry. I think I muted myself now. Oh, so the topic, it's about how to use Azure Integration Services for our enterprise integration capability. So I split that session in 4 parts. So first, let's talk a little bit about like what are those options that Azure provides to us. Then we are going to talk about what it means to have an enterprise integration capability and what kind of things I'm looking for when I want to have that capability available for my company. I'm gonna do like a demo about how to use Logic Apps as well as functions together with Service Bus. And I'll be talking a little bit about what is the latest services updates that have been happening for uh, those services in the past year or so. Okay, so that's uh, how I'm going to split the session. Okay, so first thing is what normally do we need when we talk about doing an integration solution in general, right? So that's not specific to Azure, but like normally when you go today about doing the architecture, doing the design of an integration solution, you are going to be talking about APIs. You're going to be talking how to do the integration logic of that, that solution, some kind of a orchestration or workflow, however you want to say that. Um, Sometimes we are going to talk about loosely coupled communication. We are going to talk about asynchronous communication. So that's another topic that is going to show up. And we also are going to talk about how to do event programming, right? So how to react fast to changes as soon as they happen. In terms of the APIs, we are going to be talking about, okay, I have some APIs that I'm developing, and I want to expose those APIs for my consumers. The other thing that is going to come up with APIs is I have some third-party APIs, some SaaS APIs that I want to consume. So how I'm going to do that? So that's normally like what we need to take into consideration when we are talking about APIs. In terms of orchestration or integration logic is how I'm going to do the coordination of the execution of tasks that I need to do for my integration process. And the other two things, I think they are a little bit self-explanatory. So normally those are some of the things that we need when we talk about integration solutions. Azure provides to us this term Azure Integration Services. It's like more like an umbrella term, which groups those related services together. So we have API management represented by the symbol. We have logic apps. We have service bus, event hubs. We have event grid, and functions is not here, but we have even functions here as well. Okay. So when we talk about APIs, we're going to be talking mostly about API management. So API management is a gateway, which is gonna give us access to external APIs, or we are going to expose our own APIs with that. So API management is one of the tools that we are going to use, and I would say quite a lot in our solutions. Later, like when I start talking about how we implement things at Fisher and Paykel, I'm going to show you guys how we use that. Logic apps and functions, they are going to be the ones that does the integration logic of our solutions. So we need to consume data from one system and send the data to some other. And when that system reply back, we need to send a notification via, I don't know, email or text to another user, and so on and so forth. So all this coordination of execution of my process is going to be done either by logic apps or functions, depending on my preferences. Service bus is the one that is going to handle the messaging for us. So we are going to have the ability to send a message to a queue as soon as the other system is available to process that information. Is going to pick up that information, that message from the queue, and is going to continue the execution of that solution, right? So that's going to give us two things. One is a loosely coupled type of communication. So it makes our solution not to depend on other parts of the solution. So let's say that I'm trying to go to talk with I don't know, payment system, for example, right? And that system is not available. So depending on my design, I can say, okay, I can proceed without that. I just need to save the message in a queue. Whenever the payment system is able, it's going to pick up that information and do the proper processing. And the last one that, there are in this category of the messaging, there's event hubs as well. So event hubs is going to allow for, I guess, we can say larger number of requests. It's going to allow us to do replay of execution. So there's a few more characteristics about event hubs, a little bit different from service bus itself, but they are, I guess, in the same kind of space. Event grid is the one that is going to send notifications to our processes, telling us that something has happened. A message has arrived on service bus. File has been stored in a storage account. Something has happened in my virtual machine. So event grid is gonna be the one that's gonna send notifications around. We just need to subscribe to those notifications and act on top of that. So this is like pretty much Azure service, Azure Integration Services. They have like this set of services that is going to allow us to develop our integration solutions. One thing to mention about Azure Integration Services, we are going to pick and choose based on what we want to deliver in terms of our what we are designing, right? So we can work with only one, we can work with only two, or we can work with all of them. So it depends what we want to implement as part of our integration design. That's going to be important as well when we talk about cost. So of course, whenever you choose one or you choose all services, that there's going to be a difference in cost. So that's one thing we need to consider when doing the design as well. So this is one example of one architecture that we can use. The link is below here if you guys wanna check that out. So there's a page on the reference architectures in the Microsoft documentation, and it talks about how to do this message broker implementation, right? So I have my consumer applications that wants to do sales order process, for example. So it's going to send a request to API M. API management in turn is going to do the communication with my process, my workflows. It could be either logic apps, as it's showing here, or functions. Is going to send a message to a queue. Through event grid is going to notify another logic app that a message has arrived, and then it's going to do the proper communication with other systems. Can be like a SaaS service, it could be like some other Azure services that I have. The message in the queue can come from, I guess, any place. So in this case, it's coming from here, but it could come from some other service as well. So as long as the message is in the queue and is matching my subscription, I'm gonna pick that up and I'm gonna do the processing that I want to do. So that's one of the examples that I have in the reference architectures in Azure. Okay, so that was the first session. That's just explaining like what services I have available for working with integration technology in Azure. Again, API management, logic apps, Azure Functions, Service Bus, Event Hubs, Event Grid. So those are the main services that we are going to be talking about. Normally, that's going to expand like a little bit more when we start talking about some other things. So if I say I need to involve security, if I need to involve networking, if I need to involve availability, so we need a few more services than those. But in terms of what encompasses the integration capability for Azure, those five, they are I guess the backbone. So other than the services itself, to define what is enterprise integration capability, we need to have a few other things. So, and those are the other things that like we always think about. So first, how I'm going to monitor and how I'm going to do the diagnostics on my solutions. So what if something goes wrong? What I'm going to do? How I'm going to find the problem? If my solution is not performing as I intended, how I'm going to be notified about that. So I need to have that capability. The other thing that I need to do is that my solution needs to be secure. So I'm exposing, maybe I'm exposing some APIs on the internet. So how I'll be sure that only the consumers that I trust are going to be accessing those APIs. The other thing is, once I have the request coming through, how I'll be sure that like only certain pieces of my resources in Azure that I have can communicate with each other. So maybe my solution I have like several pieces running in Azure. I just want certain pieces communicating with certain other pieces. So how can I do that? We need to consider, of course, the cost. How much is going to cost me to run my solution? And with that we have like several options to choose. I want my solution to be able to scale. So let's say I have today 1,000 users, and I got like I don't know, a huge jump in terms of users, and in a week's time, I'll have the 5,000 users. Okay, so I need to be able to scale my solution. I need my solution to be available all the time as well. So if and when I say all the time, I need to have my solution available based on the requirements that were passed to me. So sometimes I want the solution to be available workday. Sometimes I want the solution being available like 7 days a week, no stop. So that's going to impact the choice that I do, and that's going to impact the cost, of course, of the solution. And the other thing I want to have is, I think my camera went down, so I'm sharing my camera again. Just a sec. Yeah, it's back up. The other thing that I want to have is a process to whenever I have the development completed, I want to deploy that in my environment. I have automation. I want to have automation as much as possible for all those pieces. So it doesn't matter if I'm deploying API management or logic apps or functions. I want to be able to deploy all those pieces through proper DevOps process and tools. With that said, so this is all the things that Azure provides to us, right? So I think this PowerPoint is going to be shared with you guys later, so you could get those links. Let's start with diagnostics and monitoring. So Azure Monitor is going to capture a lot of information about the things that are happening in your solution. It could be, you could see like, for example, application map to see all the pieces that are talking between each other. So I don't know, APIM talking with logic apps talking to function talking to service bus, and so on and so forth, right? So you could see an application map of what's happening. You can check for performance with those graphs about how many requests per second I'm receiving, how is the performance of those requests, and what is happening with them. If you have a network configuration, so it's going to be showing a map as well. And I think this one represents well what is Azure Monitor. For us, normally we are going to work with application insights. I think that's what most of you guys probably saw before. And you should have done something with log analytics as well. But there's this whole ecosystem, I would say, to work with the information coming from Azure Monitor. So first, we need to receive the data from application, operation system, other Azure resources, subscriptions from the tenants. That's going to be into, I guess, database metrics and logs. And based with that, you're going to use some of those tools to understand what's going on with your solution. So again, I use most of the time application sites. So that's normally where I guess, stay. So I want to see all the requests that comes through. I want to see the correlation between those requests. I want to see failures. So this is going to be all provided by here. If I need something more customized, I'm going to switch to Log Analytics. I'm going to build my own queries, and I'm going to probably show those information in a dashboard somewhere. Okay. If I want to see the performance of my solution, go to the metrics. Again, application sites have a bunch of information out of the box. You can always explore yourself with the metrics explorer, or again, log analytics. So we have that box ticked for AIS. The other thing we want to have is security. And this is like, I'm listing like all those things here. And this is just like I guess, a small part. I just pick and choose the ones that I thought were more relevant. But if I want to work with authentication authorization for APIs, Azure AD, or any other like OAuth provider, would work. Normally, for the company that I'm working right now, because it's all my Microsoft shop, I'm using Azure AD. If I want to protect my solution, web application firewall, if I want to enable communication with my on-premises resources, VPN and gateway, and Express Browse, in terms of permissioning, who have access to do what in my environment, working with RBAC permissions, enabling communication between resources with Azure Private Link. So another link is that. So another link, lots and lots and lots of information about how to make your solution secure. So for example, in terms of storage, how you're going to access that. Maybe you're going to use a shared access signature, or you're going to use managed identities, how your data is going to be secure when you transfer data between or exchange data between us resources, when you store your data in Azure. So there's like a bunch of things. I'm not going to go over all of them, but there's like a very good documentation to explain how to make your solution secure. So another box sit for Azure. In terms of cost, there's two good like piece of information. So if you go to this pricing page, you can see the costs, how much it costs for each one of those services. So how much it costs for service bus, how much it costs for logic apps, functions, so on and so forth. I'm gonna go to the pricing calculator because I think it's easier to see uh, that. So if I go to Azure Functions, premium tier, with this instance, it's gonna cost me about $240 New Zealand dollars. That's gonna be 150 US more or less. If I go to the other services, I'll have like the same visibility. So let's go to service bus. Let's say I want to send like 100 million message with the basic tier, $7. If I go to standard, cost a little bit more, with $114, and premium a little bit more. Okay, so it all depends on what kind of features do you want from those services. Of course, each one of those tiers, they have different capabilities. If basic fits you well, of course, go to the cheapest. But you need to look like what features do you want to extract from them to be able to work with what works for your company. We have very good documents about scalability. There's this Microsoft Azure Well Architected framework. So this is all part of the design we need to do. So we need to understand like what is the availability that we are looking for in this solution, and how much my client is willing, or my client or my company is willing to pay, because that's going to impact your choice that you're going to do, right? So this guide here is going to help you to do some of those choices in terms of choosing the right VM or choosing the right database, or if I'm going to build with microservices, if I'm going to do something else. So there's like lots of information. This is just the first page. There's lots of information if you follow through here that is going to help you navigate and find the best solution for your company. This is sorry, one specifically for integration. So if you go to integration architecture, so a few choices here, and looking up at the basic integration, enterprise integration, you're going to see client making an HTTP REST request on HTTP request on my API that can use a logic apps to do communication with other systems. Okay, so that's the basic architecture. The one that I think that I show first was this one. So that's the one that I showed you guys first. And availability, each one of those services, they have like a specific availability. So if we go to that page, And let's say that I want to know what is the availability for service bus, and we have those details here. So 99.9 is the promise. In case Microsoft is not able to meet that, it's going to give you a 10% credit. If it goes even below that, it's going to give you a 25% back. So of course, the interest of Microsoft is to have like Microsoft will have the interest of having this 99.9 met all the time. Of course, otherwise it's going to cost them like money. Okay? When you look at this page, you look at individual service level agreements. If you are using like several services, you need to do some calculation to reach the compound availability that you have for your service. So let's say you use a service that is 99 two nines availability with another one with 3 nines. So it's not going to be, the availability is going to be less than 3 nines. So you need to do the proper math to achieve that. If you're doing that cross data centers, that calculation needs to come in place as well. So for you to understand how much availability are you talking about when you design a solution. And last but not least, we need to have some proper DevOps process and tools in place to work with deploying those solutions to my environment. And today we have two options. One is Azure DevOps. The other one is GitHub. We can use either one. Either one's going to be able to do the deployment that you want to do. I'll show a little bit of what we done with Azure DevOps when we go to the demos. Okay. Just let have a look. Any questions so far? Okay, about the slides and the recording. That's good. If you have like any questions during the session, you can send in the chat. I will try to have a look in a while to reply them. Or if you guys want to leave to then, we are going to have a Q&A session then as well. Cool. Okay, so we spoke about what services we have available for Azure Integration Services. We spoke about what we want in terms of enterprise integration capability. So that's covered. Let's talk about some of the choices that myself and my company did in terms of how we are going to tackle or how we are going to do the design of our solutions. So starting with APIs, the first thing is like we always use API management as our gateway. It doesn't matter if it is like an API that we developed or if it's an API that we are going to consume from third parties. So we are always using API management to, I guess, expose those APIs. And we classify those APIs in three categories. So one is the system API, the other one is the process API, and the third one is the front-end APIs. So maybe some of you heard of this term before, maybe you have not. I'm not gonna go too much in the detail here, but like this makes sense. It's like a kind of a standard being used like in the industry for, I guess for some time now, which means that this API, it's basically the one responsible to talking directly with the backend system. So let's say that I have some data in a database, right? And I want to consume that data to do queries or to insert information into that database. I will write a system API to communicate with that database in particular. Let's say that I want to that I have a SaaS API that I want to consume. Let's talk about Dynamics or Salesforce or any other systems you want to consume. Because I'm using API management as my management layer, I will classify those APIs as well as system APIs. Because at the end of the day, I am talking with the backend direct kind of directly, right? Because I'm consuming the APIs that talk with that system. So I classify them as system APIs as well. Once we have those APIs in place, we need to consume those APIs. And normally, like, it's not a single consumption, right? So let's say that I want to do a bank account transfer. And I have one API that does withdrawal, and I have another API that does deposit, right? So what this API is going to do is to do the coordination of those calls to those APIs. So probably I will start with the withdrawing first, just to be sure that I don't send money to someone where if in case if the other account doesn't have the amount. So I do the withdrawal first on this process API. After that's done, I go and do the deposit to the other account. So the process API is going to handle the execution of the process. In our way of doing this, normally I don't have, sorry, let's skip that. I'll go back that later when I talk about the other tools. So system records, system API talks directly with the backend. Process API coordinates the execution of those system APIs. And in some cases, I may have specific needs for my UI. So let's say that in that bank transfer example, I have a web app and I have a mobile app, and they have different needs, and I need to handle different things for each one of those UIs. So I may have one front-end API to handle specifically the web app, and another front-end API to handle specifically the mobile app. Probably they are going to be talking directly with the process API, which by its turn is going to be talking with the system API. The other decision that we did was to use messaging whenever that's, I guess, possible. That's going to allow us to decouple the services, the execution of the pieces of my integration solution, and it's going to allow for greater scalability and reliability of the solution. So in case the system fails, as long as the message has been restored in the service bus, I'm going to be able to recover from that. We use service bus with topics and subscriptions. We don't use queues because our idea is that once I publish the message on service bus, I can pick that up from one or many places. So that's why we are using topics and subscriptions. And we use event grid. So instead of doing pooling to know when something has happened, we want to know as fast as possible about that event. And we capture that event and we start processing of the message that was stored in service bus and any other things we want to know about. The other thing that we defined was we use logic apps. So that's our preferred tool to do the orchestration work. So whenever we have like a process API, it's probably talking with a logic apps. So that's how we define. So logic apps is going to handle everything that needs to be handled in terms of that orchestration process. So the choice was made because it's easier to develop with logic apps than with Azure Functions. Some may disagree, but like we think that it's easier to develop um, solutions with that, and it's faster to get developers on board than working with Azure Functions. For Azure Functions, we use mostly for utilities functions that, some things it's hard to do with logic apps, or maybe it's not going to be possible, or even if it's possible, the performance is not good. So some of those things we send to functions to do that for us. And we also do development of APIs with Azure Functions. So those are the two main things, but the whole orchestration thing we leave for logic apps. A few general behaviors. So each workflow or each logic app or function, we try to allow that piece to do one thing only. So trying to follow a little bit of the best software engineering practice. So we may have a few logic apps available whenever we try to design a solution. And we use transformation maps as always or as much as possible. Avoid doing transformation of messages inside logic apps itself. We always delegate that to transformation apps with Liquid. So that's some of the decisions that we did. To follow like the other topics that we mentioned before, so we use, of course, application starts, and we use alerts to be notified when something is not working well. Azure AD authentication, Azure AD for authentication, authorization of APIs, and to enable the communication with on-premise resource, we use a VPN gateway. In terms of the cost, we have today 4 environments: development, test, pre-prod, and prod. So for all the non-production environments, we use serverless or dev tiers. So that's how we are doing. We just use the more expensive tiers in production, and that so far it's working well for us based on the things that we use. Based on the things that we choose for production mainly, we can scale fast when needed. So we can just tweak a little bit the configuration, then we get more performance or more availability of those services that we choose. For API management in particular, we have 2 instances running at the same time, but front door is doing the always pointed to one of them. So we have like an active configuration of API management. That's because the deployment of API management takes some time. So we decided to have the 2 running at the same time. In case one fails, we do Azure front door is going to point to the other one. We always keep like the API management up to date. So it's going to be able to pick up the work and do even if it's in another region. For the other workloads, we have DevOps automation working well. So to replicate logic apps, functions, and all the things that we need to do, it's quite fast with our DevOps processes. A little bit about the practice we do with DevOps, trying to use like source code branch standards, which means developing main feature and release branches and controlling the development with those. We use individual repositories for each component or group of codes that is related to that particular solution that we are doing. What else? Yeah, we have like 44 environments to deploy. We try to simplify the life of the developer with YAML templates, so the developer doesn't have to do like the pipeline. When the developer needs to do the pipeline, it's not that complicated. I'll show that like in the next slide. We did some customizations. We did some customizations in the deployment to deploy only the things that we need. So when we deploy APIM, we don't deploy the whole thing. We just deploy the policies that have changed, for example. When we deploy logic apps, we are using the logic apps standard, so we only deploy the set of workflows that are part of a single logic app. And the other thing that we are taking into as a practice to avoid manual tasks as much as possible after the pipeline has been executed. So whenever we did, it's going to be done through whenever we need to deploy, it's going to be done through the pipelines. So this is one example of how we see. So we have stages for each environment. This is all the templates, no, not all, but this is some of the templates we have to do, for example, deployment of a function app. These are related to APIs, a few more about .NET, function app with .NET, checking files to know exactly which one has changed to deploy only that, using a little bit of Postman to do tests of our solution. And this is how the developer sees. So we have the template. This template is like a lot bigger than this one, but for the developer, that his only concern is to deploy that function or that logic caps to the environment. He just needs to concern with like choosing the proper templates, specifying a few parameters, and that's it. So everything else, like the build of the function, the execution of the unit tests, or anything that might happen in there, it doesn't need to do all over again. So we are trying to, I guess, standardize all of this as much as we can. Uh, we have mainly two patterns. One is what we call API proxy pattern, which means I have something that I want to consume. This could be a database. This could be like an API. So we have our system API consuming that information and exposing to our customers. We can have a process API on top of it. In this case, we have one. So this one handles the format from the system. This one handles the format of the system. We just need to do the proper transformation between one and the other. And this is all happening in API management. The other pattern that we use is the messaging broker plus event, which means we start the process doing something, can be triggered by a schedule action like this, could have been triggered by API management as well. That's gonna, this process, Logic Apps is gonna do something, which it means go to these APIs using the API proxy pattern again. So we don't go directly here. We always go through APIM, pick up that information, and send to Service Bus, which in its turn is going to trigger the execution of other logic apps. So this one is going to do another part of the work, pick up that information, send to the key to the topic. The topic is going to trigger the last one, which is going to pick up a few more information to finally send the information to the destination. So if you see here, there is actually like lots of things here, but mainly I think this slide describes everything that we are doing. So the API proxy pattern, represented by these guys here, the message broker with service bus, and as a cross-cutting concerns, because this happens like in the whole solution, Azure AD for authentication with those systems, application insights for capturing everything that is happening here. Sorry. And event grid to notify. So this logic app doesn't pull information from service bus. It just waits for a message notification to arrive from event grid to be able to do the processing it needs to do. So that's normally how we do. Okay, just a quick check on the questions, nothing there. So let's continue. So let's do a quick demo now. I'm going to show you one, I guess, example of how to do a sales order process, or how we are doing that, which means we have an e-commerce system that is going to do the sales order. Once we receive the request, we need to go to the payment system, as well as store information for the customer in the CRM system. The other things that might happen would be I need to store information about, products, order, generate invoices on the ERP system. I need to talk with the inventory management system to control inventories level. I need to talk with the delivery system to ship products to my customers. So those are some of the things that might be something you need to do as part of your sales order. I For this demo, just to keep it, I guess it's simple, not too extensive, because they're going to be repet repetitive anyway. I just kept like with two systems. This is I guess one example or some of the designs that we did. So it means that the e-commerce system is going to issue order request, which is going to go through this order management system, which is going to trigger the execution of the Azure Integration Service we have, starting with APIM, which is going to push a message to a topic subscription. That's going to trigger the execution of this logic app that is going to control the execution of all the process that I need on the ERP system. Once that's done, I may need to communicate with a legacy application for doing this is for the delivery of my items or my products to my customers. And this other system is about doing the inventory management. Once all it's completed, I'm going to return an update back to whoever requested that information. Okay, so just a little bit of example, but as you can see, API proxy to enable communication with other APIs, other systems, cross-cutting concerns for authentication with Azure AD, application sites for logging, event grid, service bus in the middle, yeah, and event grid like enabling all this communication. So let's switch here. Let's do this here, and I'm gonna switch screens. Okay, so what I have here, so I created this structure where I have application sites, I have my logic app standard, I have API management, the function app. Those are things that are required as part of the infrastructure. This one is for the logic app, this one is for the function, and I have my service bus namespace. So basically what I'm doing is that I have one workflow that I call sales order. So that's the first one that is going to be called by my e-commerce system. I have another workflow called execute payment, and I have a third workflow called create customer. These two here, execute payment and create customer, they are calling API M, which in its turn it's calling function apps developed here just to simulate those systems, right? So we have create customer API and a create payment API. Very, very simple API, nothing too fancy here. Let me open the code for that. Uh, so the code for the function is very, very simple, nothing too fancy, just receive payment details which contains order ID and payment value. Just do a concatenation of a string and return that information back. Customer API is pretty much the same, receive name and address, do a concatenation, return that back, just to simulate those systems. The other thing that I did, and let's go to the API configuration. So this is API management. So what I did was to create one API here, and I define this endpoint called create customer API that uses this endpoint. Sorry. That use this endpoint, which is the function itself, right? So just to show you guys that this is doing the same for this is for one function, this is for another function, and this sales order API is pointing to this address. Stock, demo, logic cap. So this is the actual logic cap that I'm calling. So if we switch here, so that's the address that I'm showing right there. So in my configuration of this API, I'm telling that this API that I am exposing through API M is pointing to that logic app. So if I go to Postman, I have this sales order API. First, let's try first the functions itself through API M. So making a call, create payment API, receive that response back, making another call through API M to that function, receive the response back. And now, again, through API M, making the request, passing this body, which is different from the bodies that you guys saw here, or you didn't. This body for payment, this body for customer, right? This body for sales order is a little bit different. You can see the structure is not exactly matching. So I'll show you how I did to manage that as well. So made the request, accepted because this, remember, is doing the communication with the other two things. I can refresh and I see one request, 9:55, my time. If I refresh here on the payment, I should see one. And customer, if I refresh here, I should see another. Okay. Before I deep dive, I enter here, let's show the code of the logic app. So the first logic app, which is the sales order, what I'm doing is receiving a HTTP request. So this is the schema that matches this guy here on Postman. I'm sending that information to Service Bus in this topic. So the topic is called Bestock 360 demo. I'm taking the whole body that I received in the HTTP request and sending there. And that's pretty much what this first logic app do. If I go to the other workflows, let's go to create customer. So this guy is receiving message from that topic. I'm calling a transformation here because remember the message that I sent here is the message, the entire message from Postman, which doesn't match the format of my API. So what I'm doing here before calling that API, I have a map written in Liquid that takes that structure, customer name, customer address, and transform in the structure that I need for this API that I'm about to consume. And I take that result from this execution of this map, pass here, and that's going to be calling my system. And if I go to Payments gonna be pretty much the same. So same behavior. Switch there. So if I open sales order, you're going to see exactly that execution. Execute payment. And create customer. Because I used large caps standard, I didn't do like the tests locally. So I deployed to Azure and I'm executing that everything in Azure. But because I'm using Azure Functions and I'm using large caps standard, I should be able to do all the tests locally if I want to before deploying to Azure. Okay, I didn't do that because uh, yeah, I guess lack of time, but you should be able to come here, start debugging. It's going to run the engine behind this logic cap as well as the function, and you should be able to test from your own machine. I think I'm a little bit over time. How we are going with time? Cool.
Alessandro, the session is going good. You can take another 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I just have a few more slides to finish that up. So yeah, basically that's like trying to show a little bit like this design that I did. Let me take this out of here. Just a second. Let me switch back to the other monitor. So basically what I'm doing, trying to show you guys like this design that I did here, which means everything happens through APIM. So the postman call is simulating the call to this guy here, goes to service bus. In this design is doing directly from APIM. I use like a large caps here in the middle to do that for me. And then it triggers the execution of the other large caps to do the reminder of the job. And again, this is a good approach because my pieces, they are independent. If I have, I don't know, if I have some issues with the shipping system, is not going to impact the processing of the other systems like the payment or the inventory or any of the others, right? So uh, it gives you some independence and you can work on fixing the problems on that particular system later. Cool. So that's what I have for the demo. Happy to answer questions at the end. I just want to show a few more slides about uh, updates on the platform. So a good and maybe a bad thing, depends how you look at that. It's not a bad thing, but like a good thing, and maybe sometimes it takes us by surprise is that large caps Azure keeps changing and it's quite fast paced, which means like lots of changes are happening, I guess, all the time. So these are some of the changes that happened for large caps in the past 12 months. So the large caps that I was showing you, the large caps standard, it was introduced to us, I think it was last year. Yeah, beginning of last year. It became GA mid of the year, more or less. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken with the dates, but like this has been introduced to us, which means that like before we just had large caps consumption, which only allowed us to execute that in the cloud in Azure. With large caps standard, you can execute that anywhere as long as you have Kubernetes. You should be able to execute large caps standard anywhere. Even let's say you want to have you want to execute large caps in AWS, you should be able to if you want. Of course, you can run that on premises as well. Okay. As you saw in my presentation, I didn't do that. I just use Azure as my hosting engine to do the execution of that logic apps. Another thing that changed, we can choose now SQL Server as the storage provider. It's in public preview, it's not GA yet, but we right now Logic Apps just uses storage accounts. Very soon we should be able to start using SQL Server as my storage as well. Lots of connectors happening and lots of connectors working with managed identity, which is good. So instead of working with connection strings, when you work with managed identities, you give an identity to Logic Apps and you assign RBAC permissions to Logic App, which makes, I guess, more secure because you're not sharing connection strings anywhere. This designer that I showed you guys, let me show that again. This designer that you guys are seeing, it's new. Just to show a little bit of difference. So this is the old sorry. So this is the old design for Logic Apps. So if you work with consumption, that's what you have. This is the new design for Logic Apps standard. So it's better because when you click in one of these things, the triggers or the actions, you have everything easily accessible here. While with the other design, it was a little bit more clicks that I had to do to achieve the same thing. And here's much simpler to work, and this design works really well. Lots of connectors, SFTP, Cosmos DB. So some things that are coming up. Trigger for SFTP, trigger for Cosmos DB. So this didn't exist before. So lots of changes. Functions. I think functions is the one that have like the more change that I saw so far. For the past 12 months. So they introduced .NET 6, both in process as well in isolated process. Added support for newer versions of Node.js, Python, Java, and even PowerShell. Availability zones for functions premium. Change of storage provider for durable functions. A new SQL binding support, and lots and lots of things. So if you want to check like not just for functions, so this link is here, but it's not just for functions. I guess search for functions, this one, but you can search, you can change the search query to whatever you want. So you can search for service bus or Logic Apps. You be able to find all the changes. A few changes for messaging, like large message support for service bus. So we had this up to 1 megabyte, now is up to 100 megabytes. Support for JMS, identity-based connections with functions, identity-based connections with Logic Apps as well, and a few other things with event hubs and event grid. And one thing that Microsoft is giving like a lot of, I guess, attention and a lot of talks is happening right now. It's about Azure Container Apps. So Azure Container Apps is an abstraction on top of Kubernetes, which means you're going to be able to work with containers that are working with Kubernetes or AKS, in the backend, but you don't have to be concerned about that. So it makes the usage of container applications much simpler. Again, another link here with details about that. So there's lots of talks happening. If you guys are going to watch like any sessions that Microsoft build. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be like lots of sessions about that in Microsoft build, which is happening, I think, next month. And there's like lots of other improvements, lots of other new features that we as MVP we discovered um, last month. We are under NDA, so we cannot share that yet. But I'm pretty sure Microsoft's going to be doing like a lot of announcements for Azure Integration Technologies at Microsoft Build, as well as Integrate 2022. So Microsoft Build, like it's Azure in general. So you should see like, I guess everything. And a few topics about integration technologies. If you want something very focused on integration, Integrate is the event to attend to. I'll be doing a talk with at Integrate as well. That's going to be focused. So I showed just a little bit of the DevOps things that we did. I'll be talking a little bit more how to work with DevOps process, pipelines and all of that for integration technologies. So, not just myself, it's going to be like lots of people there, lots of Microsoft integration platform leads, as well as like lots of other, awesome MVPs. So if you guys are keen to watch more sessions about integration, I recommend you guys to watch those. That's me. That's what I have for today.
Yeah. So Alessandro, yeah, Alexander, it was a very insightful sessions. So all attendees here, we have a lot more of webinars coming up in the upcoming week. So we do highly suggest you to register for those and get insights out of it. Yeah. Alessandro, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is an bit back, introduction to Serverless 360. So Serverless 360 is an advanced cloud management platform engineered for Microsoft Azure. So with Serverless 360, you can logically group all of your Azure integration into an application context. You can typically visualize your resources in an application context. You can spotlight failures within it. You can debug and fix the issues directly from Serverless 360. So Serverless 360 is built in specifically for Azure support team who is feeling Azure portal is a bit more complex for them. But Serverless 360, you get a granulated view of what is happening in your Azure portal. And for Serverless 360, we also have a 15 days of free trial. If you want to explore the tool or if you want to get an hands-on experience, you can sign up for the 15 days of free trial, which is the link for the 15 days free trial is available in the chat window so that you can get access to it. Yeah. Next slide. And these are few outcomes that we derive out of serverless 360. Yep. Next slide. Yeah, and we also have an product specifically for Azure developers, that is Cerebrata. So Cerebrata is an advanced Azure management tool built for Azure developers, as I said. So you get a simplified view of the data that you're processing with Azure, like you can deal with the data with service bus, storage accounts, Cosmos DB, Eventbridge. So all of these data related resources can be better managed with Cerebrata. And we also suggest you to try Cerebrata with a 15 days of free trial, and similarly link for that is also available in the chat window. Next slide. Yep. And Integrate is what Alessandro was mentioning. So it's basically Integrate is the world's largest Microsoft integration tech conference. It's a 3-day event happening on 13th of June to 15th June. It's an hybrid event this year, and it is if you're in and around London, we strongly recommend you to attend the in-person event. Or if you want to attend it online, you can also register for the online event. The registration link is also available in the chat. And why you need to attend Integrate is you get to attend 20 plus sessions. You can meet Microsoft MVPs and the technical experts in person, and you can clear your questions on the integration space that you have. And you also get to understand the best practices that you need to follow so that you can uplift your business. Next slide. Okay. So Alessandro, we have a couple of questions. Can we go ahead with the Q&A session?
Yeah, just
Yeah. So I will read out the questions to you. So we
okay.
have Mustafa as a first question. So there are so much ways to implement an integration flow with different Azure services. How can we decide which service to use as the best possible way? Is there any reference document which lists real world scenarios?
So I guess like the documentation we have about that, the reference architectures that I share like a couple of them with you guys. That's gonna help to guide you on choosing what you want. Um, there's in terms of real world implementations, I guess it's good to attend like those sessions with uh, people in general that are talking about those things. A lot of the developer, a lot of the integration MVPs, they present like very good material. You could base your implementation on. And I guess like we need to align the requirements of the solution to what those services offer. So I guess it's about understanding what those services offer and how you can meet the requirements of the business, uh, which one of those services, right? So I guess
Okay.
like to look for proper real world documentation available out there. It's a little bit hard, but
Mhm.
I guess like taking sites from the sessions from MVP and others, as well as looking for the reference architecture from Microsoft.
Okay. So one more question from Mustafa. So Azure Integration Services mostly refers to orchestrating various Azure services, but is there any training or certification which focuses on this career path?
So we have the developer certification that is going to go through some of those things. It's going to talk about logic apps. It's going to talk about functions as well. Um, the architecture exam as well covers a little bit of that, but there's no integration certification per se available today.
Yeah. Okay. We have one more question from Marcus. Can you point to an architecture document describing a solid and secure integration platform, preferably using APIM, logic apps, function apps, and VNets and stuff like that, but without going with premium tiers on the components involved?
So you're not going to find a document that describes everything together. So talking specifically about, I don't know, API M or logic apps or anything like that. But like this architecture site documentation for Microsoft contains a lot of reference architectures. So let's say you want to talk about, I don't know, let's see if there's something here. So load balancing options. So how you do that? What I'm saying is like you're not going to find something that talks specifically about API M, but we know that when we use this type of architecture, replacing the virtual machine with APIM is going to achieve what you want in terms of load balancing in particular. But you can look up for many other things here. There's lots and lots of documentation here, so that should help to guide you to find the proper solution.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Alexandro. And next we have Harish. So he has really appreciated the webinar. So thanks, Alessandro, for giving such an insightful webinar. His question is, what are some of the most common and must-have metrics that an enterprise integration solution must capture?
Normally we are interested like it depends again. It's hard to answer the architecture, I guess, answer, but like normally it depends quite a lot. So it depends like what the customer wants, what are the non-functional requirements. So let's say if one of the requirements should have sub-second APIs execution, so I'll be looking very much into how much time it takes to process execution of a logic app or a function. So that's one metric I'll be looking quite a lot. In general, I'll be looking end-to-end process execution. One thing that I thought I was going to show, and I kind of run out of time, was this. So this is what I see in application sites. So I see that this end-to-end process finished successfully. I see all the requests that came through my platform. I can look up for metrics here, availability of those services. I guess, and the good thing, like this is all out of the box. You don't need to customize anything here. So this all came like, I did the development. I just told like those services to use application sites, and this information came out of the box to me. So I guess try to use application sites. This information is quite good to let us know what's happening into the system.
Perfect. And Usman has asked, did you have one instance of APM for all your products or APM per product?
I have right now I have just one instances for all APIs and products. I don't have a need right now to split them up. So I can
Okay.
manage the definition of those APIs, everything in a single uh, place. So I'm not gonna show exactly my production environment, but this normally is how it's gonna look like. I have the customer. I have one API in a particular version, and I have like one or more operations here. And
Mhm.
those APIs, they are grouped into products. So I just assign that API to be working with a particular product. So that's normally how we do.
Okay, that makes sense, Alessandro. Yeah, and Nitin has asked for logic apps. Do you recommend standard over consumption?
Uh, Large caps, it depends. Sorry about that. Depends what you're looking for. So if you're concerned with costs, I would say go with large caps consumption because that's normally, depending on volume, be cheaper. So let's say you just need to execute. I'm gonna give a guess here. Okay, let's say you just want to execute about, I don't know, 500 requests per day, which is gonna be 1500 per 15,000 per. I'm doing the right math, I think so. Day 5, yes, 15,000 per month. So that should be quite cheap based on the Azure calculator. But if you have like a lots of requests where the consumption starts becoming like a little bit more expensive, I would say to consider large cap standard. This is just from the cost perspective. For me personally, because of the better developer capabilities with large cap standard, I always go with standard unless my company says otherwise. My company or my client says otherwise. My choice is always large cap standard because of the developer capabilities. But be aware that there are some restrictions uh, and differences between connectors from large caps consumption and large caps standard.
Okay. Will there be any performance difference between these two?
Normally, large caps standard is going to be, with large caps standard, you have more control. I'm not going to say it's going to be better because it might be not true, but you have more control with large caps standard. So if you see that your application is not, your integration is not working well, you can always add more units. you can always change the service plan to something more robust. So you can do that with large caps standard. With consumption, you are just relying on the Microsoft servers. There's nothing you can do about it. There's no configuration you can do about that.
Hmm. Okay.
So if I show
And next we,
you real, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, please go ahead, Alexander.
Oh, I was just going to show that you have, so this is large cap standard. I can say that my plan today is this WS1. It's not working well. I can just go up. So the cost for the WS1 is 180 US dollars. But if you want more performance, you can switch to this one that costs $700. The other thing you can do is to say that you can have 20 instances of whatever you choose. So these are some of the options you can do with large capacity standard. You cannot do anything like that with consumption. Consumption is serverless, so you just rely that Microsoft is going to provide the servers for you, and have you're going to have to work with that performance that they provided you.
Hmm. Okay. And next, we have a question from Abhishek Aditya. Could you please share some more details or insights on error or exception handling and retry policies as it can be handled on APM, Logic Apps, Function Apps?
So normally we handle that in the large caps itself. So if I come here, I can go to settings. So all the connectors, they have this retry policy configuration. You can specify the default. I think the default, I think it says here, yeah, it's gonna retry 4 times. I think the maximum time is gonna be, I'm not sure if it's 60 or 90 seconds, but it's gonna retry 4 times during that time. You can say, no, that's not good enough. I wanna do 90. And I wanna do that every 30 seconds. Oops. So you can, and this property is going to be available for every single connector. So every time you are leaving large caps to get information or send information somewhere, you have this possibility. You can configure the action timeout if you want to. In terms of error handling, normally I will do that with scope. So I will use scope. I will put probably those guys here. And then I'm gonna do some action, let's say simple terminate action that I will configure to run after this guy has, or we can say multiple options here. But normally whenever I do like a code configuration, it's gonna be something like this. My main behavior inside the scope. And if something goes wrong, I'll have some actions happening after that with the run after configuration.
Okay. And one more question that I can see aligned with this is the question is from Mustafa. Why do we need to insert logic apps in our processor even though we could be able to do that only with Azure Functions? Is there any general rule when to choose logic apps over Azure Functions?
Uh, there's no rule itself. So I guess like it comes a little bit with personal preference. It comes a little bit like with the performance of the platform. Um, because functions runs with .NET, and it's running like with the latest versions of .NET now. Right now, .NET 6. I would say that probably the function is going to be faster with functions than with large caps. So if the performance is something that you are concerned, You want to have like that particular execution as fast as possible. Probably Logic Apps is not going to be the best option. I Now with Logic Apps standard, we have a little bit more tweaks we can do to improve that. But either way, I think like Functions is always going to be winning in that space. So if performance is your thing, uh, I guess Functions is going to be better. If unit testing is your thing, even though we have better capabilities now with Logic Apps standard, it's never going to be equal to Functions. So, if unit tests is one of the requirements you have for your company, I guess Functions the better as well. But Logic Apps wins when we are talking about low code development. So instead of having the definition of the function and then the execution of the creation of the models and the mapping between them, transformations, this and that. So you see, for me to do this, it took me, I don't know, 30 seconds more or less, including, let's say 1 minute. It took me 1 minute because I had to build a map, you know. So it's quite, I guess, fast, the development. You just need to understand what are the known function requirements you have for a solution to be able to
Mm,
choose one.
okay. And we have Bhakto. So if we run a logic app locally, or the message is still going through Azure, or the service bus also locally available?
They are going through Azure right now. So whenever we work with Service Bus is always in Azure. There's no local Service Bus available. So when we choose the connector, when we are doing the development, you are going to say something like Service Bus. It's not showing here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they're saying built-in, but those connections they go through Service Bus, even hubs. They all goes through Azure. Even though they say it's only the connection that is running, I guess, locally, but whenever the data needs to be retrieved or sent to those things, they are going to be
Mm,
sent to Azure.
okay. And Patrick has asked, like, how to educate people to become competent to develop according to the model that you explained, and how long does it takes on an average?
Uh, I guess like guys to become competent, you are going to try a few things before making the right choice. Something that we do like these things diagrams that I show, it's a little bit of try and error as well. So we try a few things, we do a few POCs to make sure it's going to work as we intend before making like I guess a general standard that we are going to follow. So I guess do a few POCs, try it out, see if that works for your requirements, and then
Mm,
implement them. To become proficient in those tools, I guess is use the tools as much as you can.
okay. And any idea on the future of service fabric?
I haven't heard much about Service Fabric lately, but if you look Azure Container Apps, I think that's the one that I put on this slide. Just go back to that. So if you look at Azure Container Apps, I think that's gonna replace a lot of things in Azure. Azure Fabric was something that like some people use, but I haven't seen like a huge usage of that among the community.
Okay. And we have a final question from Frank. Do you have an enterprise architect design with Azure Integration Services being part of the overall architecture?
Uh, yeah, in the company that I work for, we don't have like that. In the documentation, Microsoft documentation, I also don't see anything much broader than the solution itself, I guess.
Okay. So if anyone wants to have and reference architectures, or Microsoft is the only place to go, right? Or do you
Yeah,
have
that's
any other sources for that?
no. I normally even I go to Microsoft because it's easier to use the documentation, and they do the reference architectures, following best practice. So try to follow that as much as we can.
Okay,
Sometimes we develop something for the companies, but of course they are internal for the company that we are working for.
perfect. Yeah. So thanks, Alexandro. So I think yeah, we have answered all the questions. I once again thank you, Alessandro, for this wonderful session with us. So hope to we can do a lot more sessions in the future. So once again, I thank all the participants. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alessandro. Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.
Cove.co